everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Future Contracts. Today I have a very special guest with me, Timo from Cosmonauts. Timo, you're a big character in this ecosystem, so I'm sure that lots of people know you already. But for those that don't, can you just give us a bit of background about you and what you do?
What I do, um, I've been part of this industry since 2016, and as with most things in life, it was half intentional and half by chance. So at the time, 2015, 2016 period, I was working for an intellectual property commercialization advisory, and a lot of the customers that I was servicing were in the software space. And some of those happen to be in what you would now label as IP tech or technology for IP professionals. And I became minority investor in a product that was founded a year earlier to that point. And I started looking at the whole software for law industry at the time. It was hardly an industry, really. It was still very much a novelty for many people. E-discovery was what you would have considered technology for that space, and all the companies that were doing exceptionally well were doing discovery and investigations, and everyone else was doing not particularly that well. Maybe some repositories like I manage NetDocs were still doing well, as they are to this day, but it was a very different world. And as I was in that as I was in that business, I started seeing a bit of venture capital into some software companies that were founded at the time. And as I happened to work with lawyers throughout my career to this point, I felt that, if you are building technology and targeting it at what you would consider the best paid consultants in the world, and an industry that has historically always done exceptionally well, regardless of whether we are going through a bear market or a bull market, and venture capital is starting to put money into it, there is probably a great potential for growth. And because of that, I decided to leave the business I was working with at the time, and set up Cosmonauts. And Cosmonauts really at first was really a small company of just myself to start with. And the objective was to help some of those software companies get in front of customers. And we were delivering that through just direct, what you consider now cold outreach to relevant buyers. And we decided that we set up a conference. And that first conference I did was hosted in 2017 May. I had basically no funding, barely any funding for it, so I had to host it on a bank holiday Monday, which by all considerations would be considered a suicide. To and we hosted that first conference, and it was an interesting experience, because still we did manage to get about 150 people in the room. We still managed to get a good amount of lawyers, if you wish. There was no such thing, or at least there was very little of what you consider now legal innovation teams. Those didn't exist really at the time. You had IT teams, but those couldn't care less. But at the time, the notion was that really nothing will really change. A lot of people were perceiving technology as a fad and something that will kind of wear off over time. I had the pleasure to work with some of the early innovators in the space, if you wish. So one of my first customers was an AI tool called Raven. For some of the people that may remember, Raven was acquired by iManage around that time, 2017. They were doing exciting things in the natural language modeling at the time. Maybe you wouldn't consider it AI just yet, but you could say that it was one of the first AI firms in the space. We were doing work with Workshare. For those that remember, Workshare was one of the more developed companies in the UK in the space. They got acquired by Litera primarily for their Transact product, which now is known as Litera Transact. There were some other players that just simply don't exist anymore. As any emerging sector technologies, most of them obviously fail. So a lot of the sponsors that I actually had at that first conference were companies that are no longer with us, and a few of those have been acquired. I actually have a very funny story in relation to that conference with iManage. So we launched the conference. For 3 months. No one buy shit from us. Literally, no one wouldn't touch us. And there is a lady called Melody Easton who is a veteran in the marketing side of legal tech. A lot of people would know Melody, and I spoke with Melody. She was leading some of the marketing efforts at iManage at the time, and she called me on on a Christmas Eve, so 24th of December, after I had one conversation with her. And she bought the first sponsorship from us through iManage, which was a 3K deal. At the time, it was so significant for us because it meant that we actually would have a conference. And I'm so grateful for her because of it, because it also meant for me that I have a business. For 3 months, I had no one buying anything from me. We're new to the space. There was literally nothing happening, and because of that, we end up hosting that first conference, and others joined. Fast forward, obviously, this is a very, very different space. It's space that's probably worth tens of billions now if you combine the value of some of the top organizations. I remember that we've been tracking data in the space from the very beginning. I think that when I started in 2016, we tracked about 300 products globally in the space. I think that a few months ago when we did our annual check, there were over 10,000 products now globally in the legal tech space across all known continents. So it has grown rapidly. But what has really, I think, moved the needle is the last couple of years, when technology has now been not just genuinely utilized, but it has been built in mind with the people as opposed to the companies, if that makes sense. People are genuinely enjoying using technology and feel that technology is making
Yeah,
their
I
life better.
mean, and also Gen AI, right? Because that's come and totally transformed what the tech companies can do. And we've seen so much new tech over the last since 2023 when GPT came to market. What's your experience over the last couple of years? Have you seen a different a different type of business that's come to the fore, or is it just an evolution of what we had previously?
I think that there's been a huge transformation in terms of the pace at which companies are buying legal technology. Not just in law firms, but also in corporates, and I would even say in SMEs as such. And I think that one of the reasons for this, of course, is AI becoming a household name, or something that people use in their daily routines, not necessarily for work. So that makes things a lot easier. But as simple as it may sound, the technology works, which was not necessarily always the case if we look back at some of the tools that were brought to market. I mean, even if you look at some of the early AI, it was taking a lot of effort in what you would call machine learning to get some of those technologies to be beneficial, and the level of accuracy was still subpar. So I don't think that for anyone that was an early adopter or an early participant, that's been a wasted time. I would say not at all. I think that That time is what bred what you would call alternative business units in a lot of the big law firms. I was just on a call with Dan from Osborne Clark, who have spun out a very, very successful technology advisory practice at Osborne with over 50 team members that are servicing in-house customers. And you've got countless examples of very, very successful now alternative services, if you wish, units in some of those big firms. You take Create IQ, you take ClearEX, you take you take Adolfo Goddard, for example. Those are units that are making money. They're not just purely procuring tech so that they can improve the way that those practices work. They are a revenue generator for those law firms. Those law firms have now become not just legal advisors but also technology advisors to many in-house units, and that's only possible because those firms were some of those early adopters. Those firms were the ones that were buying tech from the very beginning and investing in those units. And I think that it's now evidently being something that is bringing ROI to
And I
those
think that
firms.
to begin with, firms were doing it as a value add, as a bit of a PR exercise to show that they're utilizing tech, because their clients were going to them and saying, we need more than just legal advice. We need you to help us do a more holistic job around how we manage our in-house function and how we improve the way we operate and how we engage with you. So I think it was very much driven by the client as well. So it's not just law firms utilizing tech, seeing the benefits and then rolling it out to their customers. I think there's been a massive client push, particularly over the last few years, one that I've not really seen before, where firms have almost been forced to build arms that are AI first, technology first, innovation, optimization first. So I'm really interested to see how legal services progresses and evolves over the next 5 years and what these firms are actually going to look like in terms of business models. Do you think that will change law firms' business models, considering that now they're offering this consultancy element to it?
I think that it will change inevitably. I think that it has been changing in a slightly less tight jurisdictions. I think that UK, for example, is way ahead than the United States in terms of offering alternative ways to service legal needs. You're starting to see some of that in the United States now, with some firms coming out from Arizona with the change in legislation, etc. And I think that technology will only allow us to process more legal work, and it will allow for legal support to be more universal to both consumers and businesses. I think that what's happening, or what has been happening, is that legal support has been limited to a small group of organizations, being the law firms. You cannot provide any legal support unless you are a qualified lawyer. And in fact, in the United States, for most parts, you cannot even be partly or wholly owning an entity that is providing legal support unless you are a qualified lawyer. That obviously is restricting the amount of supply that there is to the market, and that means that most people actually don't access any legal support, and most businesses don't access any legal support because it's just
Crazy.
out of reach. And I think that the more legislation changes, and with the support of technology, industry will just grow. I think if there is some deregulation in the industry, that's what's going to enable that growth. And I think that the firms that are willing to embrace that and are able to be in a position where they can offer both of those worlds, legal support, which is predominantly by, let's say, solutions that they stand behind, and then you have what you would call premium support, which inevitably the more sophisticated customers will require anyway, will be the winners in that ever-changing environment. I've told many people that I personally feel that the biggest opportunity in legal tech is not in legal. The biggest opportunity in legal tech for me is being able to service consumers
Yeah.
and SME
Yeah.
that have historically not had any legal support. Whoever is able to bring to the market the Zero or the QuickBooks of legal is the firm, or whether that's going to be a technology firm, whether that's going to be a technology firm backed by a group of law firms. I think that's the biggest money
Yeah.
spinner
I mean,
in that
LegalZoom,
sector.
arguably the top legal tech company ever to exist, does not service lawyers. It services consumers. But it's so hard to service small businesses and consumers. I tried to do that when I first started TLB, and then I realized how much tech I needed to do it. And because I was just starting out, I decided that it's best to work with bigger teams that had in-house lawyers and then started servicing them. When I first started up the Law Boutique, as it was called at the time, the idea was that I would really productize legal support and legal documents for founders and small businesses that didn't have access to legal support. But the problem that I found there, and this is really profound and not really talked about, is the fact that these people can't readily consume legal services without all the coaching that goes around it. So you give them a document, they don't really know how to implement it. What does it mean I need to upload this privacy policy, and how do all this coaching that goes around what that privacy policy means, why I need the input that I'm asking you for, why I'm asking you to fill in this really long questionnaire, why these T's and C's aren't entirely right for your use case, and why I need to charge more to fix it. These are all things that prohibit the productization of legal services for the consumption of people that don't have their own legal support to sort of translate that deliverable. So I realized that I needed to build a lot of resources around that deliverable and to offer it in a way that was very tech first. So I needed something that was a bit more intuitive than just a binary form that you go through, because my answers, my questions would need to change depending on the context. And there wasn't a way to do that unless you had a human do it, and lawyers are expensive. So I think now with generative AI, that it's a game changer, right? Because you can have contextual interaction with the customer who can then much more readily consume a product. And then when they have gaps, they can even ask that bot, or whatever it is, to do that. And so I think there is definitely room for that business to emerge now.
I think that you're hitting the nail on the head there. I think that language, it has been a big barrier in the inability for most people to understand law. It's also what has just historically in the profession given the advantage to the lawyers. And I think that with generative AI, you have an opportunity to translate legal lingo into palatable information for most people. And I think that a lot of the technology that we even see coming out now that is exceptionally successful, I can remember other companies that have tried this 6, 7, 8 years ago, and they were just simply too early with those ideas. A lot of people that are bringing those solutions to the market, some of which are very young people, which is exceptionally important and also impressive. There's so many legal tech founders that we work with that have now raised 10, 20, 30, 100 million in funding that are in their early
Crazy.
20s. And And if you look back, they were those equivalents available some years back, but the market wasn't ready. And again, there is, for me, that's not, again, lost effort. I think that we learn from what has happened before, but even in the short lifespan of what you consider our sector now, we have seen the wheel being reinvented several times over, and I'm happy to see that others are successful. You did mention LegalZoom, very, very successful firm, but I do think that, again, when LegalZoom came about, it was still too early for the market to be able to fully benefit from that solution. And maybe there will be the winner in the space. Maybe it will be someone else. Maybe it will be some of the more conventional, what you consider more conventional players, like Harvey, for instance, which is growing rapidly. I mean, like, those guys have raised their last round at 5 billion valuation. The legal market on its own, it's not big enough to
Yes.
support that valuation. They will have to branch out. So it's a very exciting space to be in, and I think it's even more so exciting because legal technology is no longer a toy just for the ones with deep pockets. We're seeing a huge amount of SME law firms adopting technology at scale. As a group, we're seeing a lot of what you consider one-man band or small in-house teams that are buying and adopting technology, which is something that we weren't seeing 24 to 30 months ago. A lot of those people felt that technology is a little bit out of reach, that they don't have adequate budgets to support that they don't have the labor internally to champion this and meaningfully utilize it and implement it. So not only has technology become more accessible from a SaaS license price tag, if you wish, and I think that what you guys are doing is a testament of that. It's an accessible technology at a palatable price tag that it's plug and play for a lot of people. But for me, again, that's where the bigger opportunity in the space is. If you look at both the law firm and the in-house side, there's just so much software that big law can buy, and there is so much software that Fortune 500 companies can buy. So the winners in the industry will be the ones that are able to service what you consider the 90% of the market. And that's one of the reasons why that we started with the Future Contracts conference. One of the core objectives is to make that conferencing inclusive to anyone on the spectrum, not just the large organizations. And we were quite successful with the first edition in Miami, right? I mean, we had a very healthy mix of some large companies which are able to share their experience and their knowledge in the space, and we had a very, very healthy amount of smaller organizations which naturally are looking up to those larger companies. They've done the trial and error path, and you suggested that we should look at the small law firms as well, and that's why we are doing the small law firm track in London. And what has been your experience? I mean, you've been part of Law Insider now for about a year and a half, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
1 year yesterday. Wow. And I know you guys are working with a lot of SME firms and a lot of SME legal departments. In that short year, what has been your observation in terms of how willing those people are in buying?
I mean,
and
they're
using
hugely willing, because prior to this role, I used to implement tech and I used to help people decide what tech to buy based on their requirements, and then implement the technology across their organization. And I did the whole, like the technical implementation, but also the change management piece. And that was always the hardest, much harder than the tech bit. So just getting people to want to engage and to use it was really difficult. Whereas now people are much more willing. And I think that's the reasons twofold. So in the first instance, they're much more accessible, so they feel like the risk is lower. So if they invest in this and it doesn't go as well, it's not a huge lift from an effort perspective because there's not an enormous adoption journey. Whereas when I was in the space a few years ago doing the tech part, you could only really buy CLM for in-house teams. Like that was the thing that most people bought. And CLM's enormous, right? You need to do such a huge lift to get that implemented properly because most people's use case initially was, I need somewhere to store my contracts. That's the thing that really kind of pushed people to go and buy CLM. And so they would buy CLM, but then the next bit was, I now need to find my contracts and upload them to this system. And then I've been promised that the AI is going to find the relevant metadata that I need to track, like effective date, expiration date, any, like where does my data sit, all of that stuff. And it never worked. And so I had to deploy loads of paralegals to go and manually tag the data, something that, I'm glad I'm not in that business now because that role would not exist anymore with generative AI being so much more accurate and quick. So you've got that bit. And then you've got I now need to map out all my workflows so that I can automate them in a very linear fashion. So if I want to pull off this report from my CLM, I need to pre-tell the CLM that I need that dashboard. Whereas now with AI repositories, you can just chat to your contracts and be like, give me a list of all the contracts that expire in the next 3 months, and you can instantly get a report. Like that stuff just did not exist before. And so people would enter the buying space with a lot of trepidation because they realized what a big lift it was going to be. Now we're offering a word add-in, not just us. Many vendors are offering point solutions that are super effective, and they are so much cheaper than what a CLM would be that started at, if you're lucky, 20 grand a year. We're now talking $100 a month or something there or thereabouts. It's a much smaller investment from a cost perspective, but also from a time to value perspective. Because once you've got that word add-in up and running, which takes seconds, you can start to query your contracts. Then the bigger lift comes with you having to think about what rules you apply with your brain when you're reviewing a contract, or how you will take your playbook that's in a document or an Excel spreadsheet and turn it into an AI-ready prompt to make your playbook work. And so you've got a word add-in that's reviewing contracts in a way that a junior lawyer would. I say junior because you'll still have to QA it at the end to make sure that you're happy with the output. But it's a simple process that you can easily explain. Get your rules, put them in, get the AI to review your contract, and then look at the markup. It's a much easier journey. And I think this is what legal lacked. And I've got a theory as to why it lacked it. It's not that point solutions weren't possible before. It was that the market was so small. And so you'd get a tech company that would raise money. They have to show their investors that there is room to grow to justify that investment. And what you said about Harvey previously is so true. And I'm really excited to see what happens there. Because I don't know how they're going to grow in order to justify that investment that they've had or that valuation that they've had. But if you're a CLM and you've just raised 100 million and the market's too small, well, you've got to grab more of that small market. And how do you grab it? You just release more and more features and you grab more and more use cases. But then you end up with an almost Frankenstein type of solution that's very difficult to implement because you are dealing with so many different use cases, and then you become a jack of all trades but master of none. And it's just hard to get value from that. And then you see reports. Richard Tromans comes out with a report, 74, I think he was republishing a Reuters report saying that 74% of CLM implementations have failed. And everyone gets scared about that, and now they don't want to touch it. So it's a multi-pronged problem that legal tech companies, but also legal tech buyers have faced. Now you've got Gen AI. You can spin up tools really quickly. You can iterate. You can sell point solutions. And because the market's still not enormous, But there is room for growth because everyone has that problem that can be solved quite easily. So I think this space is going to explode very quickly. I think you're right that some of the big winners will be those that remove the middleman, that being the lawyer, and go straight to the consumer. But I think that lawyers will see a huge transformation both in their business models, in the way, if they're a law firm, in the way that they operate, if they're in house. You're going to see a very different skill set that's emerging. So you're not just going to have lawyers, you're going to have lawyers that are also prompt engineers and lawyers that are also process engineers. So you're going to see this combination, and everything will start to be a bit more fluid rather than this siloed, you're a lawyer, you're tech, you're this, you're that. It's going to be much more holistic and much more fluid is my prediction.
And when we look into the contracts space, you're absolutely right when saying that CLM has got a lot of bad rep, if you wish. It's somewhat been
Yeah.
tainted in a way. I don't even remember the last time I've heard of a newly incorporated CLM company.
You wouldn't call yourself.
I would say that some CLM providers have actually done
Yes.
quite well. A lot better than others. There was an influx of capital, I think maybe 3 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. 3 to 5 years ago is when the CLM craze began. We've seen some of those companies acquired genuinely. We've seen some of those companies acquired under what you would consider a rescue by others. And I still remember a standalone done by GC at our Boston event, which said CLM is like marriage. You almost always get it right the second time. And that does speak to what you quoted there from that TR report of 70+% of CLM implementation failing. But there's still a market for it, and I think that a lot of in-house teams, when it comes to contracts, they do understand that they should have some sort of a CLM solution in place. But the new players on the market around redlining, for example, has been a huge focus for a lot of providers. I mean, what are the exciting things that you've seen happening in the market from a vendor standpoint when it comes to contracts?
You see players like Spellbook and Ivo and Draftpilot, and they're doing some really simple things that are super effective, as are we. So Law Insider has a tool that has, the same, if not more features compared to some of these other tools out there. And it's offered I'm not pitching here, but it is true that we have the capability to offer this tool at a fraction of the price because of our distribution power. Because Law Insider has been around for 10 years, we've got an enormous audience, both on our newsletter, but also that visits our website daily. So we're leveraging this funnel to sell them enterprise tools at a fraction of the price because our customer acquisition cost is so much lower than these other tools that don't have that. Having said that, if you look at what they're offering, it's so elegant, and that's what I love. It is a Word add-in that redlines your agreements. It's in Word. You're not having to move away from the platform that you're in, and you are doing the thing that you were doing manually, but in an automated way that has context to it. So it's not just old school playbooks, because old school Word plugins existed, but they worked in a much more linear way. So it didn't really add much value. It kind of became more of a form filler exercise where you would tell it, if the entity name is this and this is put this entity name in, and it would do it. It was more like Curly, which is an old school Word add-in that I used to use. But now you have this context that you can tell the AI, you can give the AI, and it will do what a junior lawyer would do, if not a senior lawyer in some instances. To be able to sell such a simple, elegant solution that just requires you to download something where you already work, set your rules up, and then deploy it and see instant gains is huge. Because just going back to CLM, and one of the reasons I think it failed as a term. I'm not saying the technology failed, and I know that the failure rates has been high. There's also some really good success stories out there about how CLM was used to really streamline the way people worked. But with something as elegant as that and something as simple, you can just start seeing the gains on day one after you have deployed this tool. With CLM, you've got to wait 3 months. And no one's got the patience for that. And I don't think that the vendors necessarily focused on time to value and ensuring that people were doing things as quickly as possible. I know that some of them tried to use the NDA as a use case, and one NDA has been used extensively within the legal tech community, where they took one NDA and they automated it, and they showed adopters that if they use their CLM, they can just get one NDAs out really quickly. But that's just not the biggest pain point for lawyers. Obviously, no one loves NDAs, but automating an NDA when you just have the option to send out a document as the other alternative isn't necessarily the thing that's going to make you want to spend $20,000 to $150,000 or pounds a year. So I think that idea of being able to curate the tools that you need without having to spend loads of time and money to implement them and get value out of them, and to slowly start to build your tech stack in that way so that it suits you and you're not just taking something that's a monolith like CLM and trying to tweak the way that it works to suit you, is what's really going to transform in-house teams in particular.
So you're saying that the barrier for entry has been minimized, and there is what you consider an instant gratification and benefit that people can experience, and that's why some of the tools that you are mentioning are actually highly successful, right? Like their velocity at which they are able to acquire customers, it's a lot faster than any of those historic CLM
Definitely.
providers.
Definitely.
And we actually see, like we've seen some of those organizations not just raise significant rounds, but also present very significant go-to-market gains in a very swift period of time. And perhaps you're probably on the money there, that for many the whole CLM implementation task on its own is exceptionally overwhelming. And going back to where this conversation started, one of the huge benefits of CLM is predominantly to the organization, right? It's getting the legal affairs of an entity in the best possible order, where a lot of those, for the lack of a better word, redlining solutions, if you wish, they reward the user almost instantaneously.
And CLM is almost a strategic transformation tool. It's there to help you transform. That's scary, right? Transform feels like a big task, even though people are going after it. I want to transform my legal team, but they also have a good understanding that this is going to be an enormous lift. And lawyers are some of the busiest people in any organization. They're usually under-resourced. They're usually facing off to more people in the business than other departments are. So they don't have the headspace. They're also not necessarily that techie for them to understand the nuance of what's required in order to make this technology work, and why you need to have this special build for and so now there's an upskill that's required in order for you to understand, because they will want to understand what they're buying and why. So there's all these barriers to getting the benefit out of CLM, whereas these solutions that we're seeing now are more tactical. I've got a problem, I'm going to solve it. I'm not saying that transformation is not good, but it can be more iterative. I think people have approached legal transformation, and there's been a promise of legal transformation since I started in the industry, which was 2017, that I have not witnessed. The biggest transformation I've seen is now, over the last couple of years. And I think that's because you don't have to undergo an enormous project where you have to bring in one of the big four to help you through it, right? You can just buy a tool. You've really benefited your team and your business because you're now working faster and with less errors. And now you're like, cool, what's the next thing that I can do? You've also got confidence from that. You've learned, you've changed the way you think. Other people in the business are championing what you've done. And all of that together compounds into what we'll ultimately look at as transformation without pitching transformation. And I think that's the difference between like legal tech 1.0, 2.0, which was CLM. I think 1.0 was like document management and e-discovery. 2.0 was CLM and workflow. And now 3.0 is more AI, pure generative AI, easier solutions to pick up.
And we've seen some interesting partnerships that were recently announced. So Juro partnered
Yes, I
with
saw that.
Wordsmith, which is what you would consider a new age generative AI solution and a CLM solution. Who do you think will eat the market? Do you think that some of those new tools coming in play will acquire some of those historic CLM tools? Because at the end of the day, they have been successful. People have bought them. People have spent a lot of time and money, resource into implementing them. So I don't see them going away anytime soon. But it is natural to see the synergy between
Yeah,
the two.
I think, having loads of money will help, being able to acquire businesses that already have a distribution and an in with big organizations. Like if you're going to buy, if you're a newer player and you want to acquire a CLM, then, this is a good time for you to do that, because it's very hard for the 2.0 kind of legal tech market to catch up and get to a place where, where the current AI first tools are. And the reason for that is that they've got tech debt. They've spent millions building their own AI, and now these other guys are coming along leveraging OpenAI, and they're getting better results than those that spent all their investment building their own. So it's very hard for those guys to catch up. But they're already embedded in some of the world's largest organizations that did have the resource and the appetite to go through with the transformation projects and implement that CLM. So I think we will see a huge market consolidation over the next few years, and we're going to have to, because investors are going to be pushing for their money, and companies with that investment are going to need to spend it. So
I think that in a way the disadvantage that CLM has is also its advantage. I think that if you haven't done a terrible job in implementing a solution, you're likely to stay. I think CLM has incredible
it does.
stickiness to it. Of course, that makes it a lot slower to sell in comparative to some of the solutions that you mentioned. Ivo, Spellbook, those are plug and play solutions. You can swipe your card and have them supporting you. But I also think that that's what also makes them less sticky. And with more solutions coming in play, of course, you have to continue improving and creating further value. Whereas with CLM, I think that yes, software always improves. Software providers are always aiming to offer more so they can also bill more. But I actually don't think that it's as crucial for them to keep evolving at the pace that the other guys are required to evolve. Because let's be honest. I mean, I've spoken with a lot of GCs. No one wants to be the person that will say, "Hey, we need to change our CLM."
Yeah. Yes, and I wonder whether that will still be the case in 5 years from now, when that's considered old tech, or whether those CLM providers will be quick to evolve or acquire in order to kind of complement their capabilities. So
yeah, I think it's just it also has to do as to how far deep into the organization those CLM providers penetrate. It's like a little bit like, and then I don't necessarily like want to quote on that, because I'm a happy user myself, but no one wants to change a CRM, and no one is fully happy with its CRM, and it's just like one of those things that you would rather be half satisfied than have to go and do it again. And I think that's I think that's the advantage that
yes,
CLM has.
Yeah.
And you're right, like we'll see a huge consolidation in the industry, and I think that it's actually a very exciting space to be in and presents huge opportunities. And I do salute Richard and the guys at Jura and Wordsmith, because I can see, just by having become more familiar with the two companies, that there is great synergy between those two organizations, not just from a technologist perspective, but also from the way that the companies are run. And I do think that we'll see more of that. And I do think that we'll see some genuine mergers in the industry, because we haven't seen many. We haven't actually seen genuine mergers in the legal tech space. Most of it has been, a bigger company acquiring a smaller company. But we haven't seen many cases where two evenly built organizations with similar with similar client volume, revenues, and valuations
Yes,
have
that's
come
true.
together. And I actually do think that the CLM/redlining space is a perfect it's a perfect opportunity for people to start thinking of that a
Yes.
little bit more. And that's why I think that what you and I are doing with the Future Contract series, it's exceptionally important, because we are bringing that specialist series to the market, where people building in contracts or for contracts, and people living in contracts are able to come together,
Yes, definitely.
and discuss what's the latest
Yeah,
in the
and we
industry.
had such amazing conversations in Miami where people were just talking about their pain points, what people are using, just this sharing of knowledge that happens so fluently when people are in the same room. So, for anyone who's listening, we would love for you to join us at our event, Future Contracts, which will be held in London on the 10th of December. Timo, what's the venue? I can't remember.
It's America Square, minutes walk from Tower Hill Station, familiar venue to many of the Cosmonauts associated attendees, as we've done many events at that venue before. We look forward to having you there. We'll have two streams. We'll have our main stream, which is for corporate legal teams, and anyone responsible for innovation adoption in those teams, regardless of what your job title might be. And of course, we do our SME law firm stream, which will start from mid-morning, and it will run alongside our corporate legal stream. But we are super excited to be collaborating with Electra and the team at the Law Insider. And as we said, this is a natural continuation of a phenomenal event that we hosted in Miami. So we look forward to having you guys there.
Amazing. Thank you, Timo, for finishing that off. Timo, it's been amazing to have you. Thank you for all your pearls of wisdom and your predictions for what's going to happen. I'm so excited to be in this space now. And just before we go, do you remember when we first met?
Do I remember when we first met? Did we meet at Legal
We
Geek?
first met at Legal Geek, and then
Yeah, I think we first met at Legal Geek, right? It was maybe
it was
2018 or
2017.
2017.
And then we were going to meet up for a coffee at Citizen M, and I went to the wrong Citizen M, and I was like tracking across London to not stand you up. And then we talked about space conferences, and funnily enough, we were both in
Yes, we do talk about
we
space
both had
conferences. We both have a bit of passion for space, so it's yeah. But fast forward, it will be 10 years almost that
crazy.
we've known each other.
Yeah, so really great to be hosting this event with you, and yeah, check the link, check this
Can't wait.
podcast for a link to this event for you to sign up. And yeah, Timo, it's been great to have you.
Always a pleasure, Electra. Thank you.